welcome back. I hope you were able to make a good attempt at this Build Your Understanding problem. Let's see, so what was this? Oh yeah, I gave you ages at inauguration of U.S. presidents from Washington through Obama, and here's the data. And you were asked to construct a frequency distribution, frequency histogram, and relative frequency distribution and histograms. Now, as I mentioned when I did an example for you, there's no one right way of doing this. So to do this exercise, you needed to start out by deciding how many classes you were going to use, and then from there you would calculate the width of the class. And then you've got another decision to make after you decide on the class width you're going to use. You have to decide what your the lower limit of the first class is going to be. So there's several choices. And I went ahead and did this exercise several ways so that you could check your answer sort of even if you did it various ways. Now, I couldn't do every possibility, okay? I've been here for years doing this. So here are the ones that I did, and what you might want to do is you could sort of skim through until I do the one that's the one you did. Hopefully I did one that you did. If not, hopefully you can sort of figure out from all the examples I'm giving you here of ways of doing this, you know, you'll be able to tell if you did it right or not. But anyway, you might want to skim through the examples and then hit pause when you get to the one that is the same as the one you did. Okay, so let's see. I did, and I'll go through these in order, but let me just tell you first the ones I did. So I did one where I did 5 classes, which you might have picked because that's what I did in the previous example. I used the lower limit of the first class as 40. I did one where there were 5 classes, but I used the smallest data value, 42, as the lowest, as the limit of the first class. I did one where there were 6 classes. The first lower limit was 40, 42. Oh, and I did one with 6 classes where the first lower limit was 40. So now you might have picked 41 as your first lower limit. It doesn't matter. I did it once where I used a nice round number and once where I used the lowest data value in the set. Then I did one with 7 classes where the lower limit was 42 and 8 classes where the lower limit is 40. Okay, so again, you wouldn't have done all of those, and you might want to skim through this video until you see the one that you did to check your answers with. But just talking a little bit about setting this up before I show you the answers. Remember, you need to know what the range is. Oh, and by the way, there are 44 data values. So my favorite number of classes for this set of data happened to be 6. Again, I'll show you how to do it with 5, which you might have picked just because that's what I picked in the last example. And then some of you might have wanted more categories for a more detailed breakdown of the data. So I'll also show you splitting this up into 7 and 8 classes. Okay, but here we go. The range, let's see, the largest data value was 69, and the smallest data value is 42. So the range is 27. Now, if you split this up into, again, I'm going to show you answers or possibilities for splitting it up into 5, 6, 7, or 8 classes. So remember, the way you get the width for your classes is you take the range, divide it by the number of classes you want. So let's see, 27 divided by 5 is 5 2/5. So that's 5.4. And then you round up to the next whole number. Okay, so if I'm going to use 5 classes, the width will be 6. If I use 6 classes, or if you use 6 classes, the width, again, it's range divided by the number of classes. That works out to be 4.5, and then we'll round up to 5, okay, because otherwise we'll have data values sticking out of the ends of our classes. Let's see, if there's 7 classes, or if you use 7 classes, the width would be the range 27 divided by 7. That's, I didn't get a decimal for that, but it's 3 6/7. So that would be rounded up, the next whole number up would be 4. If you use 8 classes, the width of each class would be 27 divided by 8. That's, again, I don't have a decimal for that, but that's 3 3/8. So the next whole number up from there is 4. So notice we get the same width depending whether we use 7 classes or 8 classes. And so we'll see how that plays out when we get to those. Okay, so I'm just going to go in order here, showing you the answers. So for if you picked 5 classes and you decided, let me find my sheets here. If you picked 5 classes and you decided to use the lower limit of the first class, if you decided to use nice round number 40 for that, here's what your frequency and relative frequency distributions would look like. And I'm just going to show these briefly, so you might want to have your finger ready on the pause button so that you can check your answers. I'll just remind you that the way you get relative frequency is you take the frequency and divide by the number of data values. And there were 44 data values here. So if you'll do that on a calculator. So for this one, you'd get 0.0455. For the next one, you're going to do 13 divided by 44 to get the relative frequency. In other words, the percentage of data values that had values between 46 and 51, etc. And again, just a reminder of how percentages work. This means that 29.55% of the data values were between 46 and 51, or 46 to 51 rather. This means that 4.55% of the data values were in the category 40 to 45. Okay, so there's your data values, and here's what your histograms would look like if you have used 5 classes with lower limit of the first class being 40. Okay, next possibility, if we kind of take these in order, what if you used 5 classes, but the lower limit of the first class you chose to be 42 instead of 40? So in other words, if instead of picking a nice round number that's a little lower than the lowest data value, you decided to use the actual lowest data value as your first lower limit, okay, there's what you should have for frequencies and relative frequencies. Hit pause if you need to get a little more time to check your answers. Here's what your histograms would look like. Okay, what if you chose to use 6 classes rather than 5, and you chose the lower limit of your first class to be 40? These are the frequencies and relative frequencies you should have gotten. There are your histograms. Again, just hit pause if you need to get some time to check your answers. You might have used 6 classes but decided to use 42, the smallest data value, as the lower limit of your first class. Okay, in that case you'd have these frequencies and relative frequencies, and there are your histograms. Now, if you decided to use 7 classes, remember we said the width of the class would be 4, and that's also the width that you would have if you used 8 classes. So for both of these, you'd have class width 4. I think that's what we said, yeah. Now it turns out if you use lower limit 40, if you use lower limit 40 for your first class, it turns out that you need 8 classes to fit all your data in. And whereas if you use 42 as the lower limit of your first class, then you only need 7 classes to fit all your data in. Okay, so they both had the same width. So how do you tell which you're going to do? Well, it just worked out that if you use if you use that first lower limit as 40, you need all 8 classes to get up to your last data values. Okay, so if you use first lower limit 40 with width 4, you're going to wind up with 8 classes. These are your frequencies and relative frequencies. And here is what your histogram would look like. Histograms. Whereas if with that width of 4 for your classes, you decided to use lower limit 42, first lower limit 42, then here's what your frequency and relative frequencies would look like. You'd have only 7 classes. And here are what your histograms would look like. Okay, so hopefully you either did one of those and could check your answers, or you did something similar and have the idea of what your answer should look like.